On this episode, we feature a man who is helping people discover their true life purpose or true nature of perhaps their very existence. He has a deep connection and understanding with numbers, astrology, and has been on a deep spiritual path for over 40 years. He has a deep understanding of Indian philosophy and how everything is connected in the universe. I'd like to welcome Indra Rinzler to the show. How you doing, Indra?
I'm doing great, Dylan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time out to do this today. Uh, as we were talking a little bit off air, first of all, I think what you're doing is wonderful. I think there's a lot of people that are perhaps lost or out there, maybe in search of something deeper or gives them maybe perhaps more meaning or understanding of what our existence is. But I mean, with your background and all the years of experience, and as reading over your bio and just seeing the different studies and things that you've done, you're a pretty, I think, well-rounded and understood individual. Perhaps can you maybe give us a little bit of background into who you are, so we can kind of get like an understanding of where this knowledge comes from?
Well, the knowledge comes from your knowledge and my knowledge come from the same place. So let's get that straight. Yeah, I think, I think in your introduction, I was thinking there is, how do we do that? There is no good or bad. There is no right or wrong. There is no better. I mean, maybe there's better, but there is not better. There is not a worse. It's just, it's all opportunity. And so for me, as I became an adult, I had the situation that my parents passed. They passed 2 years apart. My mother died a week after I graduated college, and my father 2 years later from natural causes, though I kind of think it was their time. It was a little short, but it was their time. And it gave me the freedom to figure out who am I and what do I want to do and what do I need to do to be happy. And I tried to do traditional, but I didn't get very far. And one of the things I like to say is I'm not sure that I've ever filled out a resume in my entire life. So not that that was the goal, but the thing was is that I just started seeking, and then one foot went in front of the other, and I only know the next step. I don't know the last step. And so I started going to metaphysical bookstores. This is 1970 when I first moved to California. And I started buying metaphysical books and reading them, and astrology books and reading them, and just one foot led to another. I lived in an ashram for 20 years in California. I then became a world traveler, and I've only been in America one winter since '98, except for COVID winters, which obviously I've been in and haven't traveled, and that's okay too. After 56 countries and leaving every winter, we've actually enjoyed staying put and finding peace in opposites, finding peace in opposites that we change in life. In 30s and 40s and 20s we're a certain way, and then in 50s and 60s we may be completely different, and that's okay. That it all has a purpose, it all works together. So that's kind of a ramble of putting some ideas out there in the beginning of what has been my life and my process.
Wow, that's impressive. So, kind of what fueled this? Is it just been like this inner desire to explore and try to understand things and to learn, metaphysics and try to understand maybe, kind of what all this is?
Well, I would say that's part of it. I don't know that we can take it down to one. I think that we want to try to understand this world and make sense of it. I think that we want to find peace and happiness. And I remember, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, getting to a place where I thought I want things that last. Like food is good, but you get hungry again. And being in love is wonderful until that relationship ends. And intimacy is really fun, but then then that's not satisfying after a while. You want to do it, you want to have it again, you want to be so what doesn't end? What is it that keeps going that you don't need to refresh? And the only thing that does that is the inner peace, the inner love, the inner joy, the inner awareness, the inner truth. And so uh when we're feeling connected to our true self, it doesn't really matter what day of the week. It doesn't matter whether we're at work or not at work. It doesn't matter whether we're, got our favorite food or not our favorite food. It doesn't really matter. It all disappears. And all these things that we're concerned about, making ends meet in our team and the world situation and this issue and that issue, they all disappear. We take a walk in nature and it all disappears.
Yeah, I think there's
Why is that? And why that is because, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Why is that is because we are nature, and when we get into our true nature in nature, then these other things that are just noise in our head, that just disappear.
I think that there's something to be said about that. You talk about trying to make ends meet. There's something about staying in the current moment that you're in, right? If everything is fine in this very moment and not dwelling on things in the future, perhaps things that have happened in the past. There's something about that that's peaceful, right?
Absolutely. And I think that you're saying that reminds me that everybody can see that. That's a truth that you don't have to read, that you can everybody has their own experiences with this and their own understanding of that. And when you're in the moment, then all this other stuff, all the other stuff disappears, and it isn't so important.
The
And I
connection.
think
Go ahead.
that's where we want to get to.
Right.
That's where I want to get to. That's
Yeah,
where I like to be.
absolutely. And it sometimes it can be tough with all the distractions and the things around you. But yeah, I think ultimately I agree. That's a good place to be. The connection with numbers in the universe. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think that the numbers, the universe is made up of numbers. I mean, I'm not saying that it's 2, 4, 6, but I mean the intelligence that has numbers, the intelligence of 9, the intelligence of 0, the intelligence of point whatever 0001, whatever that intelligence is, that is the intelligence of the universe. And so there's an order, there's an order and a chaos to every moment. And the order is understood and can be seen in a numerical way, trying to make sense out of the universe. I was listening to a podcast of a friend of mine over the last few days, and he was talking about the understanding the order that the scientists need to prove things, and then they can find order. And so this proving, he wants the idea is to prove. They haven't proved mathematically consciousness, and so how do they prove it? How do they prove it scientifically? With numbers. So that he says they haven't proved it mathematically, they haven't found a formula to prove consciousness. And that isn't my, I don't particularly care whether we do or we don't. It isn't really my discussion, that's his discussion. But the idea is that the scientifics, the provables, and I believe science in I don't, I prove it is whether I can feel it or not. It isn't about mathematical formula. When we try to figure out, well, do you love her or don't you, or love him or don't you, we don't go to mathematical formulas, we just go to our gut. And so we feel and we say, well, they're the wrong person for you. I don't care. They're not good for you. Well, I don't care right now. It's what I feel. And so to me, that's the provable. And having it to be scientific, having it to be mathematical, for me it was a way to bring order and understanding. And I like to say is that I'm not so mathematical anymore. There's still a part of that in there, but I remember maybe 6 years ago, I was uh, I was selling somebody. I used to be a trader and I would sell things, and so a few years after I stopped doing that, I ended up buying something when I was overseas that I sold to somebody, and I sold them. They were $6, and I sold them nine, and I said to them, 6 times 9, that's 54, right? And like, my whole life, that isn't, I would never do that. But I was far enough away from the math that I said I had to kind of think about 6 times 9 and what that is. And I remember in fourth grade, I knew the whole table. I knew that there were five numbers or something like 24 that had 8 times 3 and 6 times 4. They were interesting, different ways, and we had this mathematical table. The you know the combinations, you get to 12 times 12, all those combinations, and I used to know that the back of my hand. And here I am with a friend of mine, 6 times 9. What is that? And it completely lost. And what it's been replaced by is words, thinking in terms of words and doing writing, um, the writing that I wanted to, that I've been feeling to do for a long time. And so now I start thinking in terms of words, and it's a different vibration. It's not neither, it is not necessarily better, but it's been very informative for me.
That's very interesting. And just to go back briefly, your friend, does he believe there's an equation potentially for consciousness to prove its
I
existence?
think he was saying that there isn't.
There isn't. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, astrology and its importance for us understanding the universe and perhaps how it impacts us on an individual level.
Well, astrology, I believe that we're imprinted by the planets. And I use an internet um, scientific experiment that I found many years ago that had a metal plate, and you put sand on the metal plate and you hook the metal plate up to a tone machine. And when you turn on a tone, the sand vibrates into a pattern. And as you change the tone, it changes the pattern. And I believe that this is proof that the planets can affect us, that the planets, somehow we figured out that this planet has, the Jupiter's about expansion, and that moon is about emotions, and Mars is about your doing. And I don't know how we figured that out. It could have been that a higher presence gave us that understanding. I wouldn't put it past anybody. But the point is that we're imprinted. And when we understand from our chart, when I take a look at a person, when I take a look at a person's chart, it shows I've never seen this person before, and they give me the date, time, and place that they're born, and I put it into my software, and I come up with this geometric mandala called an astrology chart. And I can then start telling them things about themselves that they will say absolutely true. And I will even give them depth about these understandings, about these facts about themselves that they didn't even know, even though I may have been with this person 5 minutes.
That's strange to me that you can, take somebody's birthplace and the day they were born and the time and gather this information and find this information. I mean, I'm not saying I disagree or disbelieve. It's just that's interesting. That really, I think, if these things are true, then that really puts an importance on even something as simple as where one's born. Um, but
Well, I
as you
think
know,
that
go ahead.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, as you know, though, that the universe really doesn't do anything by accident. It doesn't seem.
Well, yeah. The thing is that astrology is a high teaching, but it also is one of those high teachings that can be used in really funky ways. And a lot of astrology I don't actually agree with, or even and not really particularly interested in it. There's an astrology conference coming up, and I don't know whether it was 100 classes or 200 classes, and then maybe there's 2 or 3 of them in there that I'm interested. Most of them are just extraneous. They're just noise. They're astrologers try to take your power away, and how they do that is explaining things to you and telling you how you are without empowering you. I'm not interested. I'm interested in telling you how you are so you can be empowered, so that you can overcome the planets, that they are not, that while you may have a lifetime challenge because a planet is debilitated, it means it's in its least favorite place. The fact is that you can overcome that, and all of us are proof of that. And so it's about the power of astrology is to help us to know who it is that we think we are, in order to be able to let that go, in order to become who we really are. And so much of the modern world is, like astrology, disempowering. And it's a high teaching that isn't really focused on the right part of the teaching. It's egocentric, it's greed centric, um, it's focused on the wrong areas. It's about empowering us, it's not about limiting us.
Yeah, that's a very valid point, I think, and I guess I never really looked at it as that astrology could essentially do that to somebody, but what you're saying does make sense. Um,
So you think about the what we the newspaper astrology has been the scapegoat of astrology for more than a century now, because I think it started in the late 1800s in England as a newspaper astrology. But the thing is, so it has a horoscope for today, but that's only the sun sign. It doesn't really look at the other planets, and it's very generic. So like any sun, so there's 12 sun signs, and so 7 billion people, almost 8 billion people. And so there's, on average, about 750 million people per sun sign. And so the things that they say, they may be true, but they may not really be anywhere close to true, because the power, the energy that they're talking about, it may be something that you've overcome. It may be that you have good relationships, and so you don't have to worry about relationships, because you've already spent 30 years working on your relationship. So when they say that you're a Taurus and it's going to be a bad day for your relationships, that may not have anything to do with you. It's not taking into who you are and how far you've come. It's very generic. And read that, if you read it and say, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true, then you haven't given your power away. But if you then go around the whole day and you're worried about relationships, that may be helpful, but it may not be helpful. It certainly isn't in the moment.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Indian philosophy. Can you talk a little bit about that? It's not really, I don't really know much of it. I know that you studied that, right, for a lot of years.
Well, yeah, I have. I'm not sure what I can say. The guest is God. That there's 350 million names for God in India, and so they have a religious bent that everything comes from God. It's very beautiful. It's beautiful to be in India, because there's only one rule in India. That one rule is there are no rules. And
That's
so
interesting.
and so every day, even if you've been in India as much as I have, you see things that you've never seen before in India or anywhere else, and it's totally out of the box. It has it's mundane life is based on its spiritual teachings. Now, it's not necessarily the highest version of the spiritual teachings or the highest version of its life, because we have the caste system is in there, and while there may be some truth to the caste system, is that priests hang out with priests, and business people hang out with business people, and warriors hang out with warriors, and Shudras, I think, is the lowest. They hang out with each other, but the fact is that it's not about keeping us in a place. It's just about a definition of what's going on, and every definition that we can create, every definition that we have, it can be a stepping stone to freedom, but it can also be a step down into the cellar of confined thinking and small being.
Why is it important that we understand maybe our purpose for existence, or is it, or do you believe it's important at all?
Well, I people in my readings, people do occasionally say, "Well, what's my purpose?" And I deflect on that, because I think they're mostly talking about their ego, and so it's not a soul purpose. I'm not sure that our soul has a purpose. I mean, I think our soul purpose can be to learn, and it can be to grow and to evolve, but it may not be that that we come down thinking that we want to be a podcaster, or a podcast guest. It
Right.
could be that we want to communicate, and it could be that it could podcasting could be some of it, but we could just as easily take that energy and perhaps being a musical artist, if we're a musical or a director or a producer of movies, if we're inclined that way. And I'm not sure that podcasting, seeing as podcasting only started about 2006, I don't think that as a 6-year-old you were thinking, oh, I want to, that your parents gave you a headset
Right.
because so that you could be a podcaster when you grew up. and
Right.
and so I think the purpose, I think, is mostly about ego, and so I help people to understand their ego needs and what they're trying to achieve in order to satisfy something. I think our purpose on a soul level, I think our purpose is more generic, to grow. And it may be that there may be certain people that we need to meet, but it may be there just certain situations that we will get into, whether we veer off of them at 20. By the time we're 50, we're probably going to get back to those situations, a situation of being in charge, a situation of being a worker, a situation of owning a home, a situation of being a renter, a situation of being married, a situation of being single. These all, I'm of the mind that relationships are about mirroring each other's behavior, mirroring each other's the areas where we need to grow, and that is so strong that we'll put ourselves in life situations in order to learn whatever it is that we need to learn.
That's well explained. I like how you talked about perhaps the purpose of the ego and the sole purpose, but is there even beyond that a greater sense of purpose, as maybe even a collective or as a universal purpose?
Well, there could be, but I think a lot of that is anthropomorphism. I think meaning that I think that man wants that to be true, so we kind of think that that's true. But I think that God, God, the cosmic intelligence isn't bound to a particular story. It isn't bound to a team winning, because all teams are the same. And to God, all teams are his teams, and so it isn't about a certain team winning, and it isn't about you achieving a certain financial goal in your life, because it doesn't because it's above financial goals, and it isn't about having the best relationship or having the worst relationship or no relationship. I don't think any of that really matters. I think it's more about the cosmic laws being affected, which is gravity, which is photosynthesis, which is harmony, which is vibrations, which is a frequency. Those kinds of things I think are more the universal truth. But to have a certain, a certain storyline, I think that's anthropomorphism. I don't go so much for that, because it limits me. Because then I think of, this is in truth with God, and this isn't in truth. This is in harmony with God, and this isn't, and that's fallacious. Because everything comes from God, so how can it be not in harmony?
That's an interesting perspective. Perhaps one that's very open, which I can kind of get on board with that. I think it's important to stay open and not close yourself off into boxes or into categories. Although, as humans, I guess that's kind of like what we like to do, put definitions on things and box everything up in nice, neat little.
So why do we do that? Probably for security,
Yeah.
probably for order, for needing order, because of security. Because when we can understand things, then they aren't so scary.
What is your thoughts on reincarnation?
Well, I think that reincarnation is certainly possible. I kind of am in the camp that it's true, but I believe and disbelieve everything. And so if that's also anthropomorphism, that's okay. I'm happy with that too. But I think the problem with I'm glad you're having a good laugh. I think the problem with reincarnation is that we spend a lot of time thinking about, because we got cut with a knife 8 lifetimes ago, that we think that that we've got this karma this lifetime, and we do if we think that, and if we don't, then we don't. And so I'm more of the position of letting it go, that that it may be true that we did something to somebody 8 lifetimes ago, and there may be some karma, there may be some retribution, there may be some result of that right now. But I've got to deal with it right now. I don't have to deal with it eight lifetimes ago. I've got to deal with what's in front of me right here, what I'm feeling about it right here, right now. And I think we get stuck in this 8 lifetimes ago, and I don't find that to be very present. And I think it's helpful for a while, but I remember reading in a book that it doesn't matter why we hold any position we hold. We don't need to know. Let me put it another way. We don't need to know why in order to let go of something that we're holding on to. We don't need to know what it is
Yeah, that's
in
that's a
order to
good
let
point.
go of it.
Just let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just let it go. We don't need to know what it is in order to let it go. We don't need to know why we got it. We don't need to know what the cause was. We just need to let it go. And so the reincarnation becomes a backstory on a lot of other stories, and that I have a bit of a problem with.
You mentioned that, you know, perhaps 8 lifetimes ago, you were stabbed and, there's the reason why that you feel a certain way. Or, if you don't believe that, or if you let that go, then you're fine. What are your thoughts then of perhaps consciousness kind of generating or creating our future, or putting our thoughts out into the cosmos to help generate uh I don't want to say things for us, but perhaps a different path.
Well, I'm not sure that the consciousness isn't creating those thoughts, and the future is already there. So you're putting a causal with the thoughts, and I'm saying that may not be true either. So there may be a path ahead, and it may be that we can fork that path. We can make a fork in that path. But again, right here, right now, it doesn't really matter to me.
Gotcha.
Deal with it when I get
Yeah. So, I mean, what is your thoughts on perhaps, everything being energy or all one, or are we like a flow of consciousness, or does that,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I'll go with that. Yeah,
yeah,
everything is energy. Everything has vibration. Everything has a frequency. And when we live at that level, then all of the mundane disappears. That it doesn't matter what we're eating, and it doesn't matter who we're with, and it doesn't matter what we have, and it doesn't matter what we don't have, and it doesn't matter where we've been or haven't been.
that's pretty deep. What are your thoughts on synchronicities?
My thoughts on synchronicity is that it doesn't have an on-off switch. It's always happening. The on-off switch is us.
Everything is
And
synchronistic.
everything is synchronistic. Absolutely. Every moment of every day is synchronistic.
It's odd. Then what is this brings me to a question then, if perhaps the future is all written, then what about free will?
Well, we have free will, and the future could be written, but that doesn't mean that there aren't more than one version of
That's yeah. Yeah.
it. So yeah, I don't know. Again, I get bogged down when I get into that thought. You get out of the moment. You get, oh my God, am I going to get the bad future? And so then you're not in the moment, and you're not happy. And so the joy, bliss, love, peace, awareness, and trust, these all are complete. There's nothing missing. There's no lack of financial security in any of those six. There's no lack of relationship. There's no bad food. There's no ugly place to live. There is no bad policemen. There is no bad diseases. There is no bad government. There are no bad rules. Peace, love, joy, bliss, truth, and awareness. They are complete as they are, and they don't need a backstory or a future story.
Your thoughts in the afterlife, even though you perhaps don't care, or
Well, my thoughts would be is that there probably is an afterlife, that we seem to be energy, and that we have an ethereal, that we seem to have an ethereal nature. And so I've been having a situation recently. I don't know why this is, but it's that thing where like maybe I drop something out of my pickup truck, a big log of wood, and I drop it off the pickup truck, and I can kind of feel in my legs kind of the different bodies, and I can feel, whoa, like it hit my leg, but it didn't touch my leg. You know what I'm talking about? I don't know what to call that or how to Google what that is, but I can feel that it's like a body kind of runs away scared. It's like, oh, but it's not my legs, it's not the solid legs, but I can kind of feel this ethereal body. And so I
it's
like to
almost out
say
of
that
body experience, kind of.
yeah, an out of body experience, that when like maybe if you're watching something, whether TV or a movie or something, and maybe somebody gets killed, and it's a very visceral experience for you, and you can feel yourself, or something horror, you can feel your fright in your body, and your body kind of out of body, the layers sort of start separating. And so when I was in this early 20s, when I first went to the metaphysical bookstores, and I started exploring the spiritual life, I had this theory, I guess you'd call it, or feeling, that when you walk into a room, you can feel more than what's there, that there seems like there's something extra, because there's an energy, there's an energy in the room that's more than just these people gathered. And so if you're going to open up to this possibility that there's more energy in this room than what you're feeling, that there's layers or levels or even consciousness which you can't see, once you open up to that, to me that is open. And so is there afterlife? Sure. I've had a good friends of mine pass on and had and felt at 3 days felt a harmony, kind of like they locked in, like it wasn't settled and it wasn't settled and it wasn't settled. And I had a friend of mine pass on recently, a very high soul, and I hadn't seen her in a long time, and I felt very unsettled, and everybody was unsettled because this one was a real saint that we knew, and never harmed anybody. And she got cancer and passed on rather quickly, and I felt unsettled. And this went for 3 or 4 or 5 days, and then then I stopped thinking about her in the same way. Then there was peace, and I have to assume, because I've had this experience before, that there was a settling on another level. And so yes, I believe in an afterlife. I believe that there's more than this physical reality, because there's more than what we experience.
I mean,
Because we can because I had a lady friend who was intuitive enough that if I thought about her, and we were in the same state, she'd call me in 5 minutes. And if I was halfway around the world, I'd probably get an email and it would take maybe 10 minutes.
yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot because I don't know where to go with this. Uh, that's interesting on the level of being able to connect with people. I always found that fascinating with psychics and people that are maybe just have what they can call, high sensitivity or whatever it is. Uh, Perhaps it is though that there is no, really space or real separation, and it's just all an illusion. Um, I don't know. I don't know what that is. I find it fascinating. Um, what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't think there is separation. I think that the reason we feel separate is because we don't realize that we're all connected. And how do we know we're all connected? Is because we can intuitively feel each other. And if we're good, when we see somebody, we can tell whether they're happy or sad before they say anything. And if we're good, then we can feel it even before we see them. And so there is a connection going on at all times. We are connected. We're made of the same materials. We only appear to be in different bodies.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you had mentioned, when you walk into a room, sometimes you'll find you'll feel like an extra presence. I'm sure a lot of people have gotten that sense in an empty room. Perhaps even when you walk in, you just sense that there's something off or different. But in reality, though, like our senses are so limited in what we can perceive that's going around all around us, right? I mean, maybe it's perhaps something too that we're just picking up on that maybe our eyes can't see, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's the story. I mean, when you say our senses are limited, I don't know why, but I immediately get a reaction. Our senses aren't limited. I mean, it's our mind that limits them. But I mean, we feel these things, and if we
Well,
don't feel them, it's because we've been trained not to feel them, or we've rejected them.
when I'm speaking of that though, I'm talking about like, our vision and how we can only see in a certain light spectrum versus, what is available out in the universe that we know of like infrared light, that kind of thing.
Well, yes, that's true. But the fact is that we are intuitive beings, and we can feel more than, and we can see more than that. That the scientists will teach us that our vision is, this of this, but we wink at each other, you and I, Dylan, and we say, oh, we know that that isn't true. We'll let them say that, but we know that that isn't true. That's only talking about the visual the visible spectrum, but the invisible spectrum is huge, and we're affected by that at all times.
Yeah, that's valid. And I think that's something that's kind of empowering what you just said versus looking at it the other way. I like
And
that.
that is one of my goals, is to be empowered, is to empower people, is to have them let go of these ideas and thoughts that hold them back from being who they really are,
Go ahead.
which is a being who has ability to see things not with your eyes.
Yeah. I'm just sitting with that for a second. That's interesting.
You see in dreams, don't you? You visualize in dreams, you're
Absolutely.
seeing. Where are the eyes then? My eyes are closed, I don't know about you.
That's a good point. That is a good point.
you
Um,
know
yeah. What is there such a thing? And you've perhaps even shed a little bit of light on this question before I ask it, but you hear all this stuff about karma and maybe even perhaps bringing karma over into from another lifetime and things like that. And your sense of, all your studies and what you understand, kind of things to be, is there such a thing as karma or this sense of like carrying over something from another lifetime?
uh well, if there are other lifetimes, then it does make sense that we carry over, because we were told in the Bible that man was made in God's image, and so we carry over. We carry over from our previous relationships. We carry over from our what models our parenting is our own experience as a child in a family. Not the parent, but still we have experiences, and our relationship experience carries over. Our traveling experience carries over to our next travels. Our podcast experience travels over from one podcast to another. And I'll even go one step further, is that there is a universal quality in that way. And I remember being a when I was young, uh, in my late teens and early 20s, that I kind of felt that people were individually experimenting in relationships, and collectively it was happening, and it was happening collectively too. And so you didn't have to have an experience with a particular person for them to have already had that experience. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not talking very specifically, but like everybody was sort of going at the same way, at the same rate. But we weren't doing it with each other. Well, we were doing it with each other, but not not with the two of us. That your experiences and my experiences will mesh up, and we've already had the same experiences, but with other people we meet together, and we don't have to go to the beginning of those experiences. We can start where we were at. Is that clear what I'm trying to say?
Kind of. I think you mean like perhaps you kind of relate to one another in a way that's like a shared experience. Is that what you're?
No, what I'm saying is that, like, it was intimacy and sex when you were an early teen, and not an early teen, but a teen, and then it became divorce, and so people started getting, later on people started getting divorces, and people started having parents die, and people started having parents die of cancer, and so there was a collective consciousness around that, and so you didn't need to have that experience yourself in order to have some experience with it, and then you'd meet somebody else who had had that experience, and then you would line up your experiences, and they would already be mature beyond, maybe neither of you had had that experience, but there's
Uh,
that experience in the culture, and so you've
yeah,
already kind of grown with
gotcha.
that experience. It's like now it would be like social media, like maybe I'm not so into social media, but because social media is so popular right now, that I can kind of pick it up. It's in the air, I never Instagrammed, but I kind of know how to Instagram, because it's in the air. And so enough people experience it, and then we collectively sort of all move forward together.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah. So we kind of collectively draw on past experience, even though perhaps you haven't never had that experience.
Absolutely. And there's no reason to think that that ends with this plane.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Because it isn't by location, it isn't only Americans, it isn't only Europeans, you don't have to live in a democracy to have that experience. It's everywhere. And so and so it would be fallacious to think that it's only on this plane.
I often, that just brings a thought to mind. I often give time thought because it's just such a weird thing. It's such a strange thing to me. Um, and in some ways, on the human level, I think it's good for purposes of like, scheduling meetings and stuff like that. But outside of that, like, time is strange. What are your thoughts on time and like how, I don't know, just what are your
I
thoughts on?
call I call time the first concept. And the thing about it is that I have to believe that it came from the planets, from whether you want to call it astrology or astronomy, that light to dark to light was a day, and bright moon to no moon to bright moon, we'll call that a month, and then cold to hot to cold, we'll call that a year. And so time came around concept.
And it's very organized.
Well, that is organized.
Yeah.
Time may not be so squishy, because sometimes 15 minutes is forever, and
Yeah.
sometimes 15 minutes is nothing. You meditate. I meditate a certain time, a certain amount of time each day at night, and you can go through a lot of thoughts in those minutes, even though it's the same amount of minutes every day. And as my phone alarm tells me, it doesn't necessarily feel the same time every day. Sometimes it's breathless, and it's, oh, and then other times it's whoa. It's like,
Well, perhaps it's not always the same. I mean, it may
well,
just be a perception, but
yeah,
I
no, yes, absolutely.
I don't know. I just think like, with perhaps I don't know what a good example is. Perhaps I don't know. Maybe even like a psychedelic experience. The time, it's different than time. I don't know. It's just different. It's just different.
Yes, and there's a thought that as you get older, the years go by quicker.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that too.
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels that way. I think when as you age and you look back and it seems like time's flying, but then sometimes I think when you really stop and just think about all the things that you've been through and everything that you've done, it does start to kind of seem like perhaps it's like life is long too in some ways. I don't know. It's
Well,
strange.
I want to say that the year can seem really short, but a day can be excruciatingly long. So how do you make sense out of that? You make sense out of it by letting it all go. It just is what it is, and by not having a need to understand it, but just accepting that you can, like maybe one day something that your wife cooks tastes wonderful, and the next time you eat it, it doesn't taste so good. And why is that? I have no idea. It doesn't really matter. But there are yeah, everything is the same and different at the same time, and that's okay when you let it be okay.
Yeah, I like that. I do. Um, what kind of services do you offer for people?
So yeah, it came down to, I wanted to be an astrologer for a long time, but it was, I guess, not the right time for whatever reason. And so I offer people life readings. And this life reading, I use 3 different modalities. I use the Enneagram of Personality, which is the Enneagram. It comes from Greek. It means 9-sided figure. And so it's the teaching, the modality, which is about 60 years old, says that there are 9 personality types, that at our core, that we have one of these 9 personality types at our core, and it's the lens that we navigate life through. It's our security strategies, and it's also our gift to the world. And then I take people through that. So in the Enneagram, I give people their core triggers. With the astrology, then I give them their strengths and weaknesses of their planets. I don't box them in. Some people have more challenging charts than other people, but even an easy chart can be challenging. Challenging in that everything is easy, and that when you have difficulty, you don't really have much skill with that. And then the third modality is called the wheel of totality, and these are the empty houses that a house. Each house in astrology has awareness, but if you don't have a planet there, that awareness is a bit of a blind spot or a place of ignorance, a deficiency. And I find that we don't work on these deficiencies until late 40s and 50s, and 50. And why is that? Because in 20s and 30s, we're mostly building up ego. We're not interested in our deficiencies. In our 40s, we begin to get a little bit of a tired, and whether we have kids or not, and and all of our strategies, all of our ego strategies that haven't worked, kind of come down on us. And so we're beginning to, at that point, we begin to ask, uh, we begin to look at what we don't do particularly well. But earlier than that, we're not so interested in that.
So you find yourself helping out people that are usually 40 and above usually, or
No, I know.
no,
20s too, 20s
20s too?
also. They
Yeah.
they come. Um, I find 25 to be the perfect age. And why is that? Because at 21, people don't have enough experience. They can't quite understand everything I say because they haven't had enough experience. But by 25, they've had enough experience, and yet they're not solidified. By 28, I already see solidity, and by 32, even more. And I like to say 35 is the height of arrogance. Arrogance is that I know better than you. It's not it's male, masculine or feminine, that there's an arrogance. We need a little bit of arrogance. We need a little bit of stiffness in our backbone in order to be in the body. But this I know better than you, that's a security blanket. That's a strategy. And after 35, we can begin to drop that down, and then we can begin to look at our deficiencies. So yes, no, I have all ages, and the clientele are people that feel directed toward me. They're sent to me. I do a little bit of advertising and a little bit of promotion like this, but the people that feel a connection, they come, and the people that don't feel a connection don't come. And what I'm really good at is helping people to place people when they have a particular, they don't really know who they are, and they're kind of confused in their life, and they're not really connected. I can really help to those kind of people. I can really help to um, to find themselves, to give them an understanding of who they are in this life. And once they have that understanding, they've already done a lot of their work. Interestingly enough, you have to come into your identity in order to let it go. You can't let it go without knowing what it is. And in finding your identity, which is difficult for a percentage of the people, um, you start doing a lot of the work of the letting go. And so when you do find your identity, you can move quicker because you've already done a lot of work on that already. But you have to let go of those particular pieces of the identity of who you think you are, not who you are. Who you think you are is your personality. Who you are is your essence.
That's wonderful. I got two quick questions for you before I let you go here, wrap this thing up. This is a question I ask a lot of my guests because I love to get people's perspectives on this. And I love my listeners to hear, the benefits of this. So you mentioned meditation. I was going to ask you earlier if you meditated, but you had already mentioned that you do meditate. What are some benefits and some things that, that are good about meditation?
Well, meditation, the value of meditation is the quietness within. It's the tuning in, letting go of the outside. It's the finding yourself within. It's a coming to quiet. It's letting the mind hopefully quiet, and if it isn't quiet, then you just at least stop listening. But it's a practice. It's the daily dying to prepare you for the big dying. And
That's pretty
that it
cool.
doesn't and it doesn't really matter whether you have a sitting practice or a walking practice. It can, either one can be helpful. It's a quiet time, and even 5 minutes can be revolutionary. It's nice if you can get it to 15 minutes or 30 minutes, but even 5 minutes to start with, or even a minute, even a half a minute, it doesn't really matter. But if it's starting to tune within, starting to 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 be on your own, starting to turn out the world. Uh, this is a practice. This is a practice for death, but it's also a practice on how to live, to become who we really are.
That's very beautifully said. And that's why I love asking that question. You get similar answers, but they're all a little different from each person. And I can get on board with that. The daily dying for the big dying. That's interesting. Where can the listeners find you and check out your work that you're doing? And if they want to get in contact with you to start, your services.
So I have a website, Indra Rinzler, all one word.com, that you can check out and learn more about me and what I do. If you have any questions, you can write me at indrarinzler@gmail.com. I'm pretty open and easily reached if you have any questions or just want to say hi. I like to offer any listener for free that I'll send you your Vedic astrology chart, the Astrology of India. I need 3 pieces of information: your date, time, and place of birth in this life. And if you want to do a previous life, and if you know that, I can give you that too. Never made that offer before. And then the other one is, if you want to learn more about Enneagram, there's a free test that I can send to you. It takes 5 or 10 minutes. It won't maybe work for everybody, because some people are kind of hard to figure out their Enneagram. But for most people, it will definitely give you more information, and it'll get you thinking about Enneagram. So if you write me at indrarinzler@gmail.com, I'd be happy to send either of those uh, uh, information on those modalities to you. Again, with the astrology, birth, date, time, and place. And it's nice to know where you're listening from. I like that.
That's awesome. Hey, thanks again for coming on the show and taking the time to do this today. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you, Dylan, for your work and for having me on. Thank you so much.